Laura Joakimson has worked as a cruise ship waitress on the Sea of Cortez, an English teacher at a women's college in Suwon, South Korea, and a mentor for at-risk teens in Fall River, Massachusetts. She is currently an ebook writer, blogger, graphic designer, backpacker, and associate editor with Pure Play Press in San Francisco. Give it up for Laura.
This is called All She Wants. My cousin Rose really wants to get married. She's about 6 feet tall, 120 pounds, with blonde curly hair, and she's telling me how she met her fiancé. She's driving about 55 miles per hour on a 35 mile per hour arterial street in Seattle. As she stretches back in the leather bucket seat, she looks over to me and says with a kind of wicked smile, "You know, I'm the kind of person who gets what she wants." She's telling me that her fiancé, Johnny, was engaged to another woman when she met him a year earlier. "But I wasn't going to let that stop me," she says, with confidence singed with a hint of contempt. Sure enough, 3 years later, I end up flying to the Midwest to attend Rose and Johnny's wedding. By that time, they have a 2-year-old daughter together. It's all Johnny's fault, she tells me. Apparently, it's necessary to assign blame. So I'm sitting in a plush church pew 2 days later, amazed at the fact that Rose can afford this fancy shindig. My relatives, including my own family, tend to be poor, and this is one opulent gala. At the time, Rose is a penniless humanities student, while Johnny manages a local Pizza Hut. Later, I would learn the extent of Rose's creative resourcefulness. It turns out that she convinced her stepfather, Lee, to pay for her wedding in lieu of a divorce settlement with her mom. Yep, that's right. Just follow along for a moment. Rose is the daughter of 2 shattered and shattering marriages that took place in her small Midwestern town. Rose's mother, Janine, left her father for her best friend's husband, Lee. And a few years later, Lee left Janine for Rose's high school art teacher. Without divorcing Janine, Lee just moved in with the art teacher, who is herself an eccentric woman who tells people that her children, all 3 of them, are dead. As it turns out, they're not dead. They've just lived 2 counties away, but since they aren't on speaking terms, they're dead to her. Just one piece of this, and there's actually more, long, complicated family history might have put more timid souls off any early desire to marry, let alone to procreate, not Rose. She wants the whole wedding thing, a traditional 12-hour Polish wedding to honor Johnny's family background. Flowers, caterers, 6 bridesmaids and 6 groomsmen, a live orchestra, the most expensive photographer in town, and a $10,000 wedding ring. The key is that Janine and Lee had started a company together that was worth about $1 million, and Lee hadn't given Janine anything when he moved in with Rose's art teacher. Legally, they were still married, and since Janine couldn't find her inner fight song to hire a divorce attorney, Rose convinced Lee instead to pay for her wedding. A hitch in this plan for getting expensively hitched. When Rose's birth family came to town for the wedding, he asked if he could walk Rose up the aisle and give her away. She agreed, but Lee, clearly not liking that idea at all, he had planned to give her away himself, flat out decided that he was not going to pay a pretty penny for any of this. This took place 24 hours before the wedding ceremony. With only hours to go before they were planning to walk up the aisle, the distraught couple did the only thing they could think of. They went to Johnny's parents and begged them to foot the thousands of dollars in bills that Rose had racked up and that Lee, at the last minute, had refused to pay. Johnny's parents agreed, with a less than stellar early impression of their new in-laws-to-be. Flash forward to the next day, July 1st, and I'm sitting in the beautifully decorated church, and yet the ceremony is oddly delayed because Johnny's mother is late, very late. She also has Rose and Johnny's 2-year-old daughter in the car. Rose insists, "I'm not getting married without my daughter. Remember, it's July in Kenosha, Wisconsin. muggy minutes stretched into a hellish, humid hour. We fan ourselves with wedding programs and try to look happy to be there. As it turns out, Rose's mother-in-law has run out of gas on the way to church. Maybe after footing the tens of thousands of dollars for her son's wedding at the last minute, she doesn't have enough money left over to pay for gas. By the time the bride finally enters, the divisiveness between the two families feels palpable. You know, in the old country, when people got married, their people had to travel by horse to neighboring villages. Their traditional Polish 12-hour weddings were probably designed so neither family had to navigate their horse and buggies back through the woods after dark, where they might have had their toes gnawed off by wolves. Instead, they had epic, drunken celebrations where everybody could pass out and wake up hungover, happily related. At Rose's wedding, on the other hand, well, I had recently spent 2 years teaching English in a small city in South Korea, so I can say with some authority that the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea enjoys a few moments of greater warmth and intimacy than many of those spent during my cousin's wedding. After these 12 hours of mandatory connubial celebration, the next morning, significantly hungover, Rose and Johnny rolled in for their second church wedding. Yep, it's true, because Johnny's family is Catholic and Rose's is Protestant. They did a take two. Rose even had a second wedding dress made to wear to her second wedding ceremony. A hitch, sort of. Rose claimed that this was all Johnny's fault. I only asked him to do one thing. I did everything else. The one small detail that they forgot was filing legal papers to be married in the eyes of the state. And Catholic churches are forbidden to allow people to marry without legal papers. But Rose, being a creative woman with the knowledge and forcefulness to get what she wants, convinced the priest to agree to go through with the ceremony anyway. And a year after their second church wedding, Johnny and Rose went back to the Catholic Church with legal papers in hand this time, Rose wearing her third wedding dress, and they officially tied the knot. I guess maybe it's unlucky to wear a wedding dress maybe 2 or 3 times. They also had a third wedding party. Their friends now tease them about which anniversary to celebrate. I used to end the story right there, but these days I do add that more than 10 years after the fact, Rose finished putting herself through university, earned a master's degree while raising 2 babies. She now teaches history in an inner-city high school in Milwaukee. Johnny works as a guard in a high-security prison. She and Johnny are still together, still happily, thrice married. After all, Rose is the kind of gal who gets what she wants. This story is dedicated to gay couples in San Francisco and around the world who should have every legal right and privilege to, like my cousin Rose, get what they want.